Hey everyone, happy 4th of July. This is La Plata Peak, just bringing you another quick video here. And I'm going to kind of deviate from my, my philosophies behind stacking silver and kind of move into the philosophy of the reasons why I choose to buy some silver over others. What I have here are five products from the Golden State Mint, which were made on behalf of the Silver Shield Group, or Silver Shield LLC. This is a company that is I believe owned and operated by a man called Chris Dwayne, who, there's a lot of resources on YouTube. He's got his own channel called Greatest Truth Never Told, and I'm not sure how many of his videos are actually still up. I know a little while back he took them all down. He left his 8-hour long Silver Shield movie, which is, like, obviously it's long, it's 8 hours, but if you can, kind of break it up into parts or just kind of spend a day watching it, there's really a lot of good information in there. Some of it's a little more controversial than others. Some of it's sourced very well. A lot of it is, mixed in with his opinions, many of which I share, some I do not, but I'll just kind of put it out there. You can go and watch that and just kind of make a decision for yourself. Whether you agree with it or not, it is pretty well done, and it stays on point for the most part, even though it is 8 hours long. So go ahead and check that out. But, really, this was a guy that, had a family business. I want to say they were in the car business in New Jersey. And he essentially walked away from all of that in 2005 and, put all of his money into silver. And he's, built that into the business that he has today. And that's where these products come from. So what they'll do is, or what they did do, they've actually just started reissuing coins, I want to say in the last week or so, but between, I want to say 2015 and the middle, just before the coronavirus started in March, they were putting out, one proof product per week and one BU uncirculated product per week. And generally the BUs ones would be just restamps of the proof models that had come out, a week or so earlier. I tend to stick with buying the proof finishes, and it's only because I think they look better. You are going to pay about twice as much, so instead of, a $22 coin, it's going to be, between $45 and $50 for the proof set. But they do tend to hold their value more for resale, and really on eBay is the only place I've really seen them being resold for the most part. There are some forums and blog posts where you can see these resold as well, but these kind of are a good example of how they can hold their value, at least in the secondary market. But they are just 1 ounce of silver, no more than a generic round or eagle or philharmonic or whatever. Same product. The only difference is what's stamped on the front. But what the Silver Shield group does try to do, or the Silver Shield line, I should say, is they try to basically stamp, or their viewpoint of history in real time. So all of these have a 2019 date stamped on them, but they're pretty, it's maybe not recognizing that the coronavirus was going to come in 2020, but they did predict that socialism was essentially going to be taking over the United States in 2020. And if you look at the poll numbers and you kind of see how things are going, Chris Dwayne was absolutely spot on in his assessment of that. And it really doesn't matter who wins, Democrats or Republican. We're getting the same stuff, and it's just, one party, the Republican Party, is taking us towards socialism, kind of in a chuck wagon, and the Democrats are taking us to socialism on a freight train. So we're going to get to the same spot eventually. It just, how fast do you want to get there is really the question you need to be asking yourself when you go to the voting booth. And if you don't like either of those choices, there are others out there. Whether you want to put your votes or your support behind those, again, is up to you. But most people are basically going to stick with the two-party system. I think that's fair to say. So just kind of on that note, the first one that was actually released, and I'll just kind of go through these one by one, is he's got this organized crime here one, and this, got the elephant and the donkey both, taking the money and agreeing to disagree, kind of a deal. And really, the way I look at the Democrats and Republicans, it's almost like a WWE type of scenario, a soap opera, if you will. You're going to have, good guys and bad guys, depending on your perspective or how you were raised or what church you go to or what ideology you subscribe to, maybe what college professors you had, maybe what your parents thought. You know, it's going to be one of two. And, you know, generally the mantra is the Democrats are going to take care of the, you know, the poor and the people that were taken advantage of by the system, and the Republicans are going to protect our freedoms. I think that's in a nutshell what they want their supporters to believe, when realistically they're both just in it for themselves and they just want to have the power. They really don't care about anybody. You've got Trump and his, you know, gatherings in Tulsa. You know, you've got, you know, AOC, or Bernie Sanders, and they've got their, you know, people on college campuses, or a lot of these, you know, in the Black Lives Matter movement. And I do want to distinguish Black Lives Matter, that phrase, with the Black Lives Matter organization. Those are two completely different things. And if you don't believe me, go look at who founded Black Lives Matter, what they subscribe to, and what their goals are. It's not what's being advertised on the commercials that you'll see in between, you know, the reruns of The Big Bang Theory and Friends on TBS. Very, very different things. So just want to get that out there. But aside from that, you know, that, for example, I'll just kind of use Black Lives Matter and on the Democrat side, and then maybe I'll use an organization, you know, like the Heritage Foundation on the Republican side. Probably not as well known, but there are many. You know, you could look at, you know, people affiliated with companies like Amway, or, you know, any number of organizations that are center right and just tend to support Republicans no matter what. They're useful idiots. You know, that's the way I look at them on both sides. They are the, you know, the people that are going to repost to social media. They're going to just drink the Kool-Aid of whatever side is pouring it, and they are going to just do the legwork and make sure that the whatever side that they want stays in power. When, you know, if you look at the major corporations in this country, whether it's Google, Apple, Facebook, you know, what have you, they donate to both of these parties, and they pretty much donate in equal amounts because they really don't care who wins. You know, as long as they have somebody that's in their pocket making the laws and enforcing the laws, they're good to go. And that is really the wizard behind the curtain. You know, if for just kind of an analogy in that in that retrospect. So really doesn't matter if you vote Republican. It really doesn't matter if you vote Democrat. You're going to end up with the same types of policies. And I think up to this point, 2020 is a great example of that. Moving on to this one here, and this is, I believe, 2019, and I think these are all 2019. Yeah, just wanted to make sure because I know this one came out kind of late. But this is obviously Bernie Sanders, I should say. And as it has on here, the goal of socialism is communism, which is absolutely correct. You can kind of see the mindless looks on the faces of the drones behind him. And very interesting that Bernie Sanders, who was running for president in 2020, dropped out once basically all his objectives were achieved by the Trump administration, which is, you know, amazing when you think about it. But, you know, we have, you know, basically everybody in the United States getting a check from the government. Everybody in the United States having their mortgages, their car loans, their student loans, you know, their healthcare bills, all being subsidized by the federal government. This is all he wanted. So why does he need to be president? Why does he need to, you know, be on the campaign trail? Why does he need to be arguing for these things that are already happening and already being achieved? And kind of the idea of it is you get people dependent on the government, and then once they're dependent on the government, you know, they have to keep voting for the same people who are providing those services. And I was talking about with my wife this morning, you know, with, you know, kids not going to school and things like that. I mean, there's all these commercials on TV now about how kids can't be fed because they're not going to school, which to me is crazy. I mean, if, you know, why do you need to send your kids to school to get a meal? I mean, as a parent, that's your job, is to kind of, you know, provide and support your family. And when you send your kids to school, you know, for the sole purpose of that, you know, that's not really what taking care of your family is about. And I get it that there are people that are in need, and that is completely different. And then when there are people in need, that's when they need to go to, food banks or churches. There's a lot of, very, philanthropic people out there that are, willing to give to charity. I give to charity, pretty much on a regular basis. And those are the types of things that are supposed to help people in need, not the government. Because when you put your freedom in the hands of the people that you're dependent on, what freedom do you have? It's almost like if you lived in your parents' house until you were 50 and you followed your parents' rules until you were 50. You never literally lived your own life. You lived the type of life that your parents wanted you to live, and behave the way your parents wanted you to behave. And maybe some of that was the way you would want to do it, but I don't think that anybody with a straight face can correlate that to freedom. And that just kind of goes to maybe this next one here, where it has the kind of the I don't know, the millennial Generation Z type kids with their cell phones, and they're partying it up, really dead man walking kind of a deal. But the I guess what you'll hear from people that are advocates for socialism is then everybody's equal, and I'm not going to disagree with them on that. It's just that they're all equally poor, they're all equally enslaved, they're all equally dependent on another entity, and that's how we're equal. We're supposed to be equal in the eyes of the law, or the eyes of a God or a higher power, if you believe in one of those. That's where we're equal. People aren't equal, in general. If people were equal, then anybody would be playing football on Sundays and catching touchdowns. If everybody was equal, then everybody would be running corporations. We're basically a product of our our drive, what we choose, is important in our lives, and that's and when you really live under free market capitalism, that's what we're allowed to achieve and what we're allowed to do. We don't really have free market capitalism today. We have kind of a fascist, corporatist society and government, but the socialists will call that capitalism. And when they point out the flaws of the social consequences of living under corporatism or fascism, they're not wrong. Where they're wrong is calling it capitalism, because it's not. But you've got the old Soviet hammer and scythe here with these guys, and I think, just kind of on a side note, with the SIG case behind me, I guess the Looney Tunes are on HBO Max now, and they took away Elmer Fudd's hunting rifle and replaced it with a scythe. Now, it's not just that they took away the hunting rifle, which in and of itself was ridiculous, but now he's hunting Roger Rabbit with a scythe. And I don't think the scythe is an accident. I think that really is kind of, a nod to socialism or communism. I think, the idea that, people are going to go out and shoot shotguns, wrongly or recklessly because Elmer Fudd is carrying one around. I mean, there were a lot of kids growing up in the 40s and 50s with Bugs Bunny on every day, and that didn't happen. So I think it's kind of a twofold thing there. But I do really like the iconography in this one. It's not one that is priced as high if you look for these on eBay, but you'll generally see them, I don't know, $60, $70, with a spot price is over at 18. So that's still a pretty hefty premium, but all these were bought by me between, I think, $42 and $45. So, still a pretty good percentage for what I paid. Just kind of go to these last two. They really kind of focus on this lady here, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a congresswoman from the state of New York. I believe she represents a district in, it's either, I want to say it's the Bronx, or maybe the northern part of Manhattan is her district. I'm not exactly sure. I know it's New York City somewhere, but she was a bartender like 5 years ago, and they've got her kind of done up here as Che Guevara, and Che Guevara is kind of the play to that. And you can kind of see the United Socialist States of America flag, which is essentially the 13 stripes we know, with the hammer and scythe Soviet symbol on where the stars would go. But she's kind of the face, and it's my opinion that if she were old enough to assume the office of the presidency, she'd be running this year. I believe she doesn't turn 35 until sometime in late 2021, or in the middle of 2021, but she will not be 35 by January 20th, 2021. So she is ineligible to run for president in 2020, but you can expect her to be running for either vice president or president in 2024. I would bet a great deal of money that one of those two will come to pass, and I won't even be surprised if, once Joe Biden, if he does become president and resigns or passes on before he's able to complete his term, that she will be in the mix for being appointed as vice president, if possible. If she's old enough at that point. But right now she's not. But she is kind of the face of that movement. She is not a wise person. She's very good with social media. She's very good with rabble rousing. But as far as like knowing facts and things like that, she's very ignorant. She, just as an example, she confused John Maynard Keynes with Milton Keynes. So she's basically talking about the Keynesian economics and how great it is. And she basically called John Maynard Keynes Milton Keynes, which I believe is a neighborhood in London. But that's the type of stuff that, she's just reading off a script. There's a lot of theories out there that she is just kind of a plant for, a movement that is very much endeared with socialism. But, that's really not anything anybody's ever really going to be able to prove. But it wouldn't surprise me, just, based on where she came from to where she is now. She, I know she at least was an actress at some point. She did go on auditions and, things like that. So I can't rule that theory out. Don't have any proof of it, but it is interesting and one I find something that I'm probably going to keep up on more in the future. And then this one here just kind of like ties it all together, where it's got AOC again here at the bottom. And standing behind her is the legacy of Stalin and Lenin, and the kind of the skulls here of all the people that have been persuaded by and died under communism. Che Guevara murdered thousands of people. Lenin murdered thousands of people. Stalin murdered thousands of people. Mao Zedong murdered millions of people, and millions of people could have easily been killed under Stalin as well, and perhaps even Lenin. But the idea that socialism is inclusive, that it respects other points of view, is just absolute nonsense. You either agree with these people or you don't, and if you don't, they will find a way to silence you one way or another. Either through imprisonment or intimidation or through death. That's what's been their mantra for as long as socialism has been around. And there was a really interesting video that George Gammon put out last week on socialism and communism, what their goals are. And a point that he brings up in that video, which I think is something that everybody needs to know, is that when Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were writing the Communist Manifesto, they kind of put out there that you need capitalism to get to communism, and what they were looking for is late stage capitalism, quote unquote. And that's the transition that that they want to make. And every communist always thinks that they're at the late stage capitalism point, and ready to move on. I think even Barack Obama, when he was running for president in 2008, one phrase that really caught me at the time was when he said, "We are the ones that we've been waiting for," referencing to his campaign and his group of supporters. And that just means that they're the ones that are ready to bring late stage capitalism into socialism. Lenin thought his time was, bringing late stage capitalism in. Mao, 50 years later, or 30, 40 years later, thought that it was his time to bring in. And it just always seems that they're always ready, and that, to bring in socialism or communism from late stage capitalism. And I'm sure that, Maduro and, the people in Venezuela thought the same thing. And if you look at where Venezuela is today, with their hyperinflation, with them, a lot of people eating out of garbage bins, and just everybody being equal and equally poor and equally miserable, I think we're just about on the precipice of getting there ourselves here in the United States. So, it's very much likely that we're going to be electing not just a socialist president in the future, a socialist Congress, socialist, justices of the Supreme Court are going to be appointed, and we're just going to be living in a very, very different place. This is not going to happen overnight, and it hasn't happened overnight. It's probably been happening, I don't know, since the hippies in the 60s were, out advocating this. So it's taken, 40, 50 years for things to really get put into place, but the pieces are in place right now, and eventually they're going to be moved to a place where, if you're just a regular person and you're just trying out to eke out a living, you're going to find yourself put in a position where you're going to have to support these people and keep the scraps that you're allowed to have, or choosing a different path. And that different path may have serious consequences for you and your family if history is any indicator. So it's a lot to think about. Obviously you can probably guess where my philosophies lie with that, but until I'm at the point where I have to make that decision, I'm going to do the best I can and just try to, everybody I know, try to change their hearts, try to change their minds, and try to think of trying to imagine a society where you don't care what anybody else does as long as it doesn't impact you. And I think if you just ask the average person, that's something that they would be, pretty much in favor of. And why we can't get there, I think it all comes back to this Hegelian dialect where we have good guys and bad guys, and we're putting on a show, and we're rooting for our guy because they're our guy and not their guy, and it doesn't matter what our guy does or what our guy says, or what our guy believes. We just want to win. I think that's the mindset that most people have, and that's ultimately the reason why we are going to be led down a path to where we are, all equal. So, just kind of leave it there. If you guys have any thoughts or questions, I know this went a little bit longer than I normally do, but had a lot I needed to get out there, and just kind of end with, you can find these all on eBay. Like I said before, if you did want to pick these up, you're probably going to pay a little bit more than I did, but if you want to have them, they are to be had. But it also just kind of gives an idea that when you do buy these items from the Silver Shield, you may be able to make up what you paid for them pretty quickly, if not turn a profit if you're into flipping and things like that. These are something like I'm probably going to want to keep and pass on down if I'm able, but your mileage may vary. So again, thank you for watching, and hope you guys have a very safe and happy 4th of July, and until next time, peace out. Have a good day.